Early this year, I began my game dev journey. I've always wanted to make a game since as long as I could remember, and I've dabbled in programming and with other engines like RPG Maker and Game Maker Studio. But these projects were never really meant to be shared with anyone, and were mostly done out of curiosity. I decided this year I was going to change that. I've always been interested in space sims since I was younger. One of the first games I ever owned was Wing Commander, and I've always been interested in making a game like this. Recently, I noticed a lot of powerful tools were becoming available for independent developers, and I decided this was my time to try making some of these ideas in my head a reality. So I've begun work on this project. Hi, I'm Chris Clark, and I'm making Resistance is Futile, a space shooter roguelike. In Resistance is Futile, players will engage in fast-paced space combat with a variety of enemies, aided by their capital ship and friendly fighters. As they progress through the levels, they will acquire loot, upgrade their capital ship, and their fleet, allowing them to gain the edge they need as their enemies increase in number and power. Players will start by engaging small waves of fighters and progress towards fighting increasingly challenging enemy fleets, star bases, and ace pilots as they prepare for the final battle. I'm drawing inspiration from games like Star Fox, Wing Commander, and Rogue Leader. I want a game that's approachable, but offers opportunity for skill expression, and a focus on combat. Thematically, I'm also drawing inspiration from series like Battlestar Galactica, where a massive capital ship slug it out while aided by groups of nimble fighters and bombers. I began work on this project early this year, and I've been prototyping various game systems for flight, AI, and weapons. Today I want to share with you some of the systems I've been working on, and some of the challenges I've faced as a solo developer. Today, many of the basic systems of the game are finished. Combat AI for fighters, capital ships, missiles, and turrets work more or less. There's even a demo level which reflects the kind of encounters the player can expect from the game. I've also started working on ship designs, updated shaders, and other content. This has been the culmination of several months of work, and I'm really pleased with what's been made so far, and I've learned a lot in the process of designing it. I began coding this project from scratch, designing basic scripts for flight controls, weapons, and enemy AI. While I have some formal coding experience, I've never programmed in C# before, and learning it was a hurdle to starting my project. I previously made a test game in Unity using its visual scripting tools, but I found them limiting in some aspects, and decided to avoid them for this project. Some of the most invaluable tools I found for learning to code in C# were the new generative AI tools that were released early this year. ChatGPT turned out to be great for learning to program rapidly. It helped me quickly build out the initial systems, a control system for the player's ship, some cannons that followed the player's mouse, AI cannons that sort of track targets, and missiles that flew towards enemies. I built a basic scene with some assets I purchased online. I put the scene together and it wasn't very good. I wanted my game to have a lot of missiles, and what I got was basically a slideshow. This introduced me to the concept of optimization, and I learned a lot more about programming by bug fixing ChatGPT's code than I could have ever learned in a programming class. I didn't consider this time wasted, as I learned what questions I needed to ask in order to start achieving what I wanted in my game. After a few days of trying different solutions for efficiently processing the logic of my missiles, I was able to create one by learning how to use arrays to update all of the missiles from a single script. With missiles sorted, I turned to other aspects of my game, like the enemy AI. Originally, I encountered similar optimization issues with the fighters as I did with the missiles, so I put them aside for a while, and I made a demo involving large battles with capital ships. Here I was able to stress test the code I had so far to see how it performed, and it was starting to look pretty good. My work machine only uses an NVIDIA RTX 3060, and I prefer to keep it that way to make sure my game doesn't require the best hardware to run. The number of ships I was able to fit in the battle was impressive enough to me that I could move on to other steps. At this point in my project, only about a month or so in, I got off track a little bit with my original goal and started designing a solar system generator that would place planets at realistic scales and a warp drive that allowed players to reach distant systems. But this was beyond the narrow scope that I had previously planned for my game. And while I kept some of the ideas, namely the idea that everything would be at scale and that the design would now have players traveling using warp drive between encounters, shortly after finishing this portion of my game, I took a hiatus on the project, as I had to deal with some life matters. I returned to the project this month. I've made a lot of changes and improvements from the work I finished previously. Namely, I began to rework my demos and scripts to align with my original vision. Fewer big capital ships, and a focus on dogfighting. A lot of the initial work for the AI was already completed. I developed a rather customizable script that allowed me to tune the behavior for my capital ships. It only required some altering of variables to make the behavior that was more suitable for a fighter. But I still wasn't satisfied with the result. Firstly, while this resulted in interesting swarm behavior, it wasn't very realistic, and it didn't work well when there were many fighters on both teams. And there was also an issue with the gun accuracy. The script I originally made to manage the aim for cannons seemed to work fine, and had 100% accuracy against targets that were very large and very slow. However, the script missed 100% of the time against smaller targets like fighters. One physics lesson later, and I was able to alter the script to properly account for the movement of the target and the shooter. The new AI was a Terminator, and I'm probably going to have to add inaccuracy for gameplay purposes. With cannons sorted, I spent the next few weeks rewriting portions of my AI script and adding new functions for cases specific to fighters and capital ships. This eventually required me to make a new script to manage the targeting system. Fighters, capital ships, and point defense turrets had different priorities, and these needed to be managed in a way that was logical. The original targeting script was really only made for capital ships fighting other capital ships and shooting down missiles. It was also highly dependent on a rat's nest of scripts that would completely break if they weren't executed perfectly in an order. When I made these scripts, I knew at the beginning I was going to have to rewrite them, so this was the best time to do it. The new targeting script that I made not only simplified the number of dependent scripts required, it in combination with the rewritten AI script allowed the AI to complete all of the objectives without a player's intervention. Since working with your fleet and your squadron is meant to be an important factor in the player's success, I consider this to be an important milestone for the project. The final challenge I dealt with was the floating point problem. This is something common with space games. Games like Unity use a coordinate system to determine where objects are relative to one another. This is calculated to a certain decimal point. When objects move too far from the center of the world, they gain a 0 and they lose a decimal point. As a result, they begin to do this. To prevent this, we have to use what is called a floating point, which is a script that basically teleports the player to the center of the world and all the objects around them at the same place relative to the player. The problem with the approach had to do with particle effects and VX graphs, which aren't objects and require more involved programming to ensure that they are properly moved. After a day or two iterating on different versions of the script, I found a solution that accomplished what I wanted, though I had to change how some of the special effects function to accommodate the system. The original graphic pack I used for this game was largely functional and not very pleasing to look at, but it was a starting point. Originally, I created a large number of textures for planets, which were meant to add variety to the locations that the player fights around. These were created using stable diffusion, and I generated about 100 unique planet textures. Of course, these were just flat textures on a sphere, and so they looked pretty bad, and I eventually went back to the Space Pack default for testing. But I didn't want to abandon the idea of generating textures for variety, so I began investigating shaders. The new materials are still a work in progress, but they do look much better than what I had previously. I'm also investigating shaders as a replacement for materials on ships. All of this work is still very early, and I'm still learning how to use shaders properly, but the results so far seem promising. Moving forward, I feel I've completed enough systems that I can start focusing on creating gameplay. My goal over the next month will be to create encounters for the player, as well as the core gameplay loop of traveling from battle to battle and gaining loot to upgrade your fleet. Additionally, I want to create a small combat demo for players to try. I'd really appreciate any feedback you could provide, and I want to make a game that players can really enjoy. If you've liked what you've seen so far, and you want to support my project, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel for more updates. I'll be launching a Steam page for the game after I've made a bit more progress on the project. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next devlog. Peace.